The Whipping Boy, Chapter 9, Revealing Jimmy's Plan to Trick the Villains. Hold Your Nose Billy popped a clove of garlic into his mouth, ground it between his yellow teeth, and helped himself to a veal pie. Nothing like garlic to clear the head and fend off the plague. Cutwater, give the lads a ration of breakfast. The scrawny outlaw sliced off 2 thick pieces of coarse bread. He draped a salt herring across each slice. Eat hearty, little fellers. This smelly stuff? Prince Brat glared at the bread and herring. It's not fit for flies. Why, we eat it regular, worms and all, said Cutwater, picking the bones of the pheasant. I'll starve first. Suit yourself, Cutwater snickered. This is the first time we've feasted off the king's own table, and there's hardly enough for me and Billy. Jimmy sat on the bedstraw beside the prince and contemplated his breakfast. He examined the bread closely, hunting for varmints. The prince, he knew, had never been starved enough to pick out wildlife from his grub. Eat, he whispered. I can't find any crawly things in it. The bread's stale, grumbled the prince. Stale enough to patch a roof, but I've scoffed down worse. The prince began to nibble around the edges. Hold Your Nose. Billy glanced over and grinned. Take a chaw of garlic, Whipping Boy. It'll improve the taste considerable. Cutwater wiped his thin, greasy lips with the back of his hand. Billy, how do we know the prince ain't laid a trap for us in that message? He could have said one thing and wrote another. Where'll we find someone to read it off to us? Jimmy lifted his chin to a regular height. You doubt the word and honor of your prince? Insolent oaths! Curs! I'll have you horsewhipped. Cutwater yanked Jimmy to his feet. Who you calling them names? I'll flog your hide pink as a salmon. Hold Your Nose Billy pushed him aside. Keep your wits. It's worse than common murder to lay hands on a prince. No need to break any more of the king's laws than we have to. If it comes to a flogging, there's his whipping boy. The prince's eyes widened and his face blanched white. The prospect of taking a whipping himself had never occurred to him. But, sir, it wasn't me who called you names. Cutwater gave a sudden cackle. Sir, is it now? That's more like it. But tell the prince here to keep a civil tongue in his head. Prince Brat shot Jimmy a poisonous look. The garlicky outlaw was leaning closer to Jimmy. See here, Prince, it's not that we doubt your word and honesty. Not a bit. But all the same, let's hear you read off the message. Jimmy turned away from the man's breath and began to read. No, lad. Let's have it from bottom to top. Read it backwards. I do hope for your whipping boy's sake you don't stumble and trip as if the real words ain't on paper. Jimmy shrugged. It says, son obedient your obedient son, said Hold Your Nose Billy. Keep at it. Jewels and gold of cart full a of ransom, a demand they. They demand a ransom of a cart, a full. The outlaw himself began to stumble and trip over the words. That's the ticket. Jimmy read the message through backward, and then a second time before the hairy outlaw was satisfied. Now then, he said, all we got to do is get the message to the king without getting nabbed in the act. Simple, declared Jimmy. Send it to the castle in the hands of my whipping boy. Chapter 10, in which Prince Brat lives up to his name. Hold Your Nose Billy clapped a leery eye on the rat-catcher's son. Prince, do you take me for a precious fool? Send your whipping boy to blab out where we're hid, eh? The king will come chopping down every tree if he finds out we're nested in the forest. Jimmy assumed a princely air of indifference. Then tote the message yourself. It's no skin off my ear if you never get back alive. He filled his mouth with bread and herring. I declare this is tasty. Prince Brat scoffed under his breath. He hadn't shown a moment's interest in Jimmy's scheme to free him. Their eyes met and clashed. Jimmy thought. He's fuming like a stovepipe at being unprinced. He'll have me charged with treason. I'll stand guard over the prince, said Cutwater. You're the one to go, Billy. Me? Hooted the big man. Me? That they sing songs about and pinch their noses? At the first whiff of garlic, it will be off with the head of Hold Your Nose Billy. Unlikely, corrected Jimmy. True, Papa would have you tortured a mite to loosen your tongue, but he wouldn't have your head. Not Papa. He favors slow boiling in oil. The effect on the outlaws was instant. Hold Your Nose, Billy's jaw dropped. Sweat broke out across his face like raindrops. Cutwater, you're skin and bones. You could slip in and out of a keyhole. I'll guard the prince. Fall, Billy. I don't fancy being boiled to a crisp. The hairy outlaw gave a loud and decisive snort. We'll send the whipping boy. Jimmy held back a sigh of relief. And my crown with him. Your golden crown? Blurted out Cutwater. Not by half, we won't. Jimmy made the pretense of blazing up with impatience. Simpleton. I swear there are not two more ignorant, cloven-footed blockheads in the land. Prince Brat shot Jimmy a quick thunder-scowl look. Stop it, he whispered harshly. Don't give them the rough side of your tongue. You'll get me whipped. Jimmy ignored him. Donkeys, he continued. Before the day is out, dozens of villains will deliver up false claims. Only my crown will convince Papa that you're the genuine villain. Hold Your Nose Billy began to pace, munching garlic cloves as if they were grapes. Finally, he tipped the crown off his head and flung it to Prince Brat. Whipping boy, deliver it to the king. If he doesn't follow our instructions to the letter, the prince will be done for, Cutwater snickered, drawing a knife-like finger across his throat. And blab all you want, added the other outlaw. We'll pack the prince off to a different hiding place. By its smelly tail, Prince Brat tossed aside the uneaten herring without showing the slightest concern for Jimmy's fate. He flicked a glance at the two outlaws. I'll deliver nothing, he exploded. I won't go back to the castle. Chapter 11, containing a great deal of shouting. Jimmy was struck dumb. Did Prince Brat have sand for brains? God. Didn't he realize he could snatch up his crown and go free? It doesn't please me to take orders from common rascals, Prince Brat said coldly. It would please me to shake the teeth out of your confound face, replied Hold Your Nose Billy. You may live in the castle, but you're only a whipping boy. Do as we say. I'll do what I choose, and I choose not to run your errands. Jimmy leaped up and gave the prince an angry hash of eyes. Jimmy from the streets, get these stubborn fits, he said, contrary as a mule. Let me have a word with him. I'll whip the mulishness out of him, exclaimed Cutwater, lurching forward. Prince Brat dodged out of his grasp, and a sour smile crossed his face. I'll tear up your vile message the moment I'm gone and keep the crown for myself. Hold Your Nose Billy caught Cutwater's upraised arm. Hold off! There's something in what he says. You think he's angling for a share of the reward, Billy? Likely is. The greedy little snipe, Cutwater bleated. How much do you reckon we can spare? This calls for private words. Let's parley. Follow me. The moment the outlaws ducked out of the hut, Jimmy turned on his companion. Prince Blockhead, you should wear your crown to fend off woodpeckers. Impostor, how dare you insult me? You're enough to give the devil himself fits. Haven't I so muddled their brains they want to turn you loose, and you reward me with a royal squawk? The prince had crossed to the wicker basket and snatched up an uneaten apple tart. He gobbled it down. I'll return to the castle when I'm ready, when I choose, and not a moment before. Jimmy's eyes narrowed sharply. He couldn't fathom what was stirring in the prince's mind. Could he, for once, be concerned for someone other than himself? It's not me you think you're protecting, is it? You? Knowing they'll knock the daylights out of me soon as they find out I tricked them? The prince shrugged. You're quick, boy. You'll think of something. I've already thought of it. Once you're up and gone, I'll slip away, out in the forest. I'll be harder to catch than a flea. But I'm not leaving, said the prince firmly. But why? Is your paw you're afraid of? Is that why you won't go back? The prince scoffed. He won't miss me. Of course he will. Let him wait. And mind your own affairs, whipping boy. It is my affair. Do you reckon you're out on a lark with murderers outside? The murderers shuffled back into the hut. Hold-your-nose Billy fixed Prince Brat with a hairy smile. Never let it be sung about that me and Cutwater ain't generous to a fault, lad. We'll share out with you a bucket full of gold and jewels. No, replied the prince flatly, as if he had been offered a bucket full of coal. Don't run me out of patience, warned the huge outlaw. The prince remained defiant. I'm staying. Hold-your-nose Billy ripped off his leather belt. I'll lash a bit of sense into your head. Jimmy saw that Prince Brat wasn't going to shift his ground. You don't need my whipping boy to get into the castle. There's a better way. Do say, exclaimed Cutwater doubtfully. My horse, remarked Jimmy. There's your messenger, sirs. Hold-your-nose Billy gave a snort. Paw, that fine beast? We've been afoot since our skin-poor horse turned hills up. We need a mount in our line of work. Nitwits, exclaimed Jimmy, as if his own princely patience were at an end. With rings on your fingers and gold in your pockets, you can take to the roads like gentlemen. You'll be traveling about in fine coaches. But first, you've got to lay hands on the treasure. Cutwater made a sound through his nose like a pitch pipe. With that horse outside, one of the king's own, a horse can always find his way home, can it? That fine beast will make for the castle stables, note and crown, no questions asked. Chapter 12, wherein Jimmy is betrayed. With a gleeful chuckle, Hold-your-nose Billy dropped the ransom note and the golden crown into a dirty linen sack. When he knotted the sack to the saddle, he turned to Cutwater. Soon as I'm within a squint of the castle, I'll turn the beast loose. Guard our prisoners. I'll tie 'em up, Cutwater wheezed, giving his heavy partner a foot up into the royal saddle. From the doorway, Jimmy watched Hold-your-nose Billy vanish into the tangled maze of tree limbs and brambles. Then he glanced about at the bare furnishings, the hanging ropes of garlic bulbs, the bed straw, the chest of stolen goods. He'd need some trickery to escape. The prince fixed him with a smirk. You're clever, all right, but a common dunce all the same. A cartload of gold and jewels. The ruffians would have been content with a mere jingle of coins. Jimmy's eyes swung back to the bedstraw. There was his escape. A cartload of moonshine, he said. It'll never be forked over. I'm the prince. Papa will have to pay. Jimmy began burrowing like a barn mouse under the moldy straw. Not a bit he won't. Papa will foam at the mouth. Jimmy was disappearing limb by limb under the straw. Think again. It'll be clear as water. The note's a scrambly, witted fake. Papa will keep me under lock and key after this. It won't fool a soul, that note. How could you have written it? Everyone in the castle knows you can't so much as sign your own name. I never needed to before. It's me that's in the soup. I'll catch it for your mischief in running away. And I'll catch it again when the tutor claps eyes on the handwriting. He'll say, Jimmy, this is Jimmy trying to line his own pockets. Your pa scragged me with his bare hands. So I'll be obliged if you'd help me nip out of here. I promise you my protection, announced the prince with sudden generosity. Jimmy protects himself, said the whipping boy. When that plaguey Cutwater comes to tie us up, tell him I slipped out the door. Soon as he bounces off after me, I'll make a break for it. You'd leave me alone with cutthroats? Before Jimmy could answer, he heard the sharp squeak of the door. He held his breath. Lads, you won't mind if I tuss you up like a Christmas goose. There came a sudden pause, and Jimmy's heart began to thump. Where's the prince? Cutwater snapped. Jimmy heard Prince Brat answer without the slightest hesitation. Him, over there, under the straw.